Money shapes so many of the choices we make, yet for many women it's still a conversation we avoid. In this episode, we're joined by Claudia Quintela to talk about investing, confidence, financial independence, and why every woman should know where the money is.
Welcome to The Bridge, and today we're joined by Claudia Quintela. And Claudia has worked in finance for over 25 years and now supports midlife professionals with money clarity and career reinvention.
Thank you for having me.
So for anyone kind of meeting you for the first time, can you just tell us a little bit about how you describe what you do now, and then we'll get into where you started.
So one of the really difficult things to say when you have a portfolio career is to describe what you do. And I have a group of activities that I do that are all kind of connected or interwoven by my interests. And I've worked in investment banking for a very long time, and I still work in finance. That's the biggest thing that I do. I work in finance, and I work with hedge funds, and I consult with hedge funds to help them launch. So it's a very specific focus on early stage hedge funds. And that is kind of the thing that people associate with a job. So where I started a portfolio career, but on top of that came a series of other things that are all connected to things that I enjoy doing. So I also write, and you found me on Substack, but I write a newsletter and focus on portfolio careers and especially entrepreneurship in midlife. So entrepreneurship, midlife, female perspective, but really with a portfolio career view that you do things that you enjoy, not all of them motivated by money. Money obviously is one of the things that people think about. And then from writing that, I had other writing opportunities. So I started writing for Portuguese publication, which I started a few months ago, 4 or 5 months ago. And on the back of that, people were telling me, maybe you should start a Substack. And so I started on Substack 6 weeks ago. I think it's 7 weeks today. So that is around 3,000 subscribers. So it's just really started.
Incredible.
Thank you. And then I did one podcast in finance that I thought I just dipped my toes. Someone asked me, I really liked the host. And I thought I want to help people. So I did that podcast focused on early stage hedge fund managers. And I thought that was it. And then that completely exploded. And I wasn't even aware of it. So that is the stupidity of this whole thing. And on the back of that, I had so many questions that then I started another newsletter that I always thought maybe one day I should write about this, which is called Emerging Managers, which is focused on my finance expertise. And you could see where this is going. So you're stacking things on top, right? Yeah. So now I have a bunch of things and they're all related. And most of them weren't planned. Mm-hmm. I didn't set out to have a portfolio career. I just happened to have a portfolio career.
I love that. And so many women especially are feeling this pull towards it and are like, where do I start?
So I got one job in finance in a bank. It was working in something that I really believed in, which at the time, portfolio management in currency, so in foreign exchange. With that, a few years later, I moved to another job that it wasn't the role itself, but the people who have interviewed me, I had a very strong feeling that I want to work for these people. Don't just look at jobs or opportunities based on what's on paper and what the pay is, but also on the people that are involved, because they will make or break your career and your opportunities. So if you have a toxic job, a toxic boss, it's the worst thing that can happen. Your days are miserable. But if you have people that really believe in you, that will really sponsor you, that can change your outlook on everything, on the opportunities you get, how you show up every day, how you perform every day. Obviously, all of this then gets you better pay, better roles, better promotions, all of that. People tend to think about money put the money aside for a second, and look at that. Because if you believe in the company, maybe the role is not ideal, but you think that that's, I think it's Sheryl Sandberg that says that if someone offers you a seat on a rocket ship, you're not going to argue what the seat is.
Right. Right.
It's a little bit like that. So you just, and I felt every time that I moved jobs, I felt very strongly that I have to do this. At a certain point, I was 3 times a week on a plane, but always coming back to London. I've never been based in another country. And that's an experience that I recommend people have, because it gives you an immersion that you wouldn't have if you are remote, right? Mm-hmm. It's completely, those water moments with people in the office, in other offices, they're really precious. So I'd always recommend to people who are starting out, move and explore, do it in your 20s, because that's when you're supposed to do it. But going back to your question, so I've moved, and then I ended up finally working for a hedge fund. And that's one of the things that I've always toyed with, the idea of doing that. And that was an incredible place to work with. And when that came to an end, because that fund became a family office, then that's when I started working for myself. And again, I did not plan that. I was very pregnant. I was about to explode pregnant. And I was 40. I am a geriatric mom, according to UK medical profession. And I was very ill at the time. I didn't know, but I was very severely anemic. So I had lost my balance. I couldn't really, sometimes I couldn't see properly. So and I was trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do next? And the client called me. And this is why I always say it's so important to look at relationships, whatever relationships are. And here we are, like you met me on Substack, right? Mm-hmm. Far too often people see relationships as transactional. Mm-hmm. And relationships are ultramarathons. They're not sprints. And so I have those relationships. I've made an effort to cultivate them. And when I say effort, it does require effort, but it's not a sacrifice. So it's something I do with pleasure, but intentionally. Okay. And so one of those relationships called me asking me, I wanted your thoughts on this. And, just one of many of those conversations that I've had. And I gave that person my thoughts. And he said, well, could you help me? I said, look, if I could do this from my laptop on the phone and I don't need to stand up, then we're good to go. There was no branding. There was no corporate logo. I was operating out of a Yahoo email.
Amazing.
I think what I absolutely love about this is the more women we speak to, and I know we are in a very similar position in the same way, is that transition when you become a mother is often that turning point in many women's careers. And I'm really interested to dip into that sort of portfolio life with you later on in the podcast, because that's something that we feel very passionate about. Mm-hmm. and is clearly a real turning point with a lot of women we speak to. But I think, first of all, I wanted to circle back to hedge funds. I think women in particular, we are, yes, it's a changing environment, but it's a very sort of male dominated and can feel quite an intimidating topic, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So for anyone that's thinking this is quite a mysterious topic or nothing that they've ever sort of encountered before, in simple terms, can you describe what a hedge fund is and what does that world actually sort of involve?
I guess it's interesting that you say it is. I think the world of finance, there's a little bit of obscurity, right? Hedge funds are investment vehicles. So the people who trade the markets, usually listed markets. So if you think about equities, bonds, futures, foreign exchange, so across a bunch of what we call public markets, but not private markets. So companies that are not listed in stock exchanges and so on, they would be part of things like private equity. Hedge funds are different than the typical, let's say, investment vehicles that you see out there in banks, in retail banks and so on, because they have higher risk, they have lower liquidity, some of them, and higher return profile. So they have, they're supposed to be sold to what we call professional investors. So the average person on the street probably does not have access to them unless they're bundled in a retail product. Yeah. And so, yes, it is true that finance has a massive bias towards men. Yeah. And I remember when I joined UBS in the foreign exchange floor, how many women there were, and there were very few, and how many women were married with kids, even fewer. Okay. And it just happened that I ended up working in an area that was a very interesting moment in time when, like, the largest hedge fund, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, Bridgewater, at the time was a currency manager. So it was a competitor. They became now massive giant, but it was a super interesting moment in time. And I never really thought, okay, I'm surrounded with men. That's not, like, I just enjoyed what I was doing and that was it. But it wasn't always easy. It's not always easy, but there's also quite a lot of interesting and advantages to being a woman in that world. What I am not going to sugarcoat, because I get younger women and Gen Zs asking me this, especially in private, especially when other people have left the room or when they can ask without anyone seeing, is there are very awkward situations that can come out of this. You will be, statistically, you will have situations where you will fear for your safety. I did have. Okay. And you will have situations that are at the very least uncomfortable, where you'll be mansplained something, where you may be, or you will likely be, called too dramatic, too emotional, all sorts of things, right? And you have to learn how to live with that, right? On one hand, try to change the world, yes, try to change the world, but also try to adapt and realize that this is the situation. So how do we deal with it? Okay. So if we're talking about the safety issue, because it would be disingenuous not to speak about this. And when we talk about women and financial freedom and so on, I think there's an element of safety and physical safety. To me, the things that I have done are, for instance, I do not drink. Client events. So if you are traveling around the world with a bunch of guys, in some situations that are, look, incredibly nice hotels, incredibly nice restaurants, incredibly nice flights, and all of that, you eliminate a lot of problems. You don't eliminate all of them, but you eliminate a hell of a lot of problems if you don't drink. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to say, no, I'm not drinking, than it is to say, I'm not having another glass. And then people may think that you're pregnant, or they may think whatever. That's their problem, not yours. Whatever they think is their problem. Okay. So that is one thing that I would say. But there's many things, like I always travel with one hand free, because I need to be able to open a door, and get out of a car if I need to. And the reason why I'm giving that example is because I've been in situations where that happened, So yeah. There is that element. And so there is the safety element. There is the element of harassment that will happen. And how do you deal with it? And it's not easy. But there's also wonderful things about this, because if you're surrounded with guys, there will be wonderful guys too there who will extract you from those situations, who will not allow you to be in those situations. They see it, they notice it, they remove you. No questions asked. So I've been very fortunate to work with people like that, like wonderful, wonderful people. So there are bad apples, but there's a lot of good apples. And then there's the issue of, being able to promote your work, being able to talk about what you do. And women and men do that in different ways. And it could be sometimes feel a bit daunting to go into a meeting where you have 40 guys that are all talking about how great they are. And you go, right? So that is hard. Look, I've been in those situations. And there's no way. I always think, do you know that book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt?
Yes, we do.
Okay. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You got to go through it. Right? And that's the only way you solve it. You solve it like you go through it. You kind of prepare and you rehearse if needs be, but you need to talk about your work. You need to be able to promote your work, for your work to be seen, because your work doesn't speak for itself. Funny how that is.
That's right.
Doesn't speak for itself. So you need to promote yourself. And that's one of the hard things about leaving these jobs. And you were saying women when they have kids, and I'll go back to it because I want to add to that. But one of the issues of leaving a corporate job and starting to do your own thing is that you become a jack of all trades. And one of the trades is being the salesperson. And if your job did not entail that, so if you were a salesperson before, or if you were a client relationship manager before, or whatever, you're more comfortable with that. So that comes more natural to you. But if you were someone who was doing research, product management, whatever, it's like all of a sudden asking you, can you go to the dentist every day? It is awful. It's so unnatural. And so you need to train yourself to do that. And it's hard. Again, it requires reps. And you can't go over it, can't go under it. You got to go through it, And then children. There's things that are tricky in there. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to put the emotional thing aside. But your cognitive abilities are affected once you have a kid. Your brain is fried. There's a reason why they call it, the maternity brain, that those first few months is just incredible. And so there's so many things going on hormonally. And so, and you may not have a lot of confidence, because I always say it's incredible how, to drive a car, you need to get a license, right? To get a job. And some years ago, you used to have to go to university. And somehow they've allowed me out of the hospital with 2 kids without any bloody training. And I managed to keep them alive.
I know. It's incredible, isn't it?
It's like, and you walk out of and it's okay whilst you're in the hospital. I mean, okay, depending on what state you kind of ended up after the fact. But then you need to put that kid in the car, like the car seat.
Yeah, I know. I didn't do this.
Totally. I'm like, I think I'm going to cry. It's like,
sometimes you do.
I'm going to cry. And it's really tough. So there's all these things. And then your self-confidence is destroyed because you're a shell of what you used to be. And there's all these hormones going on left, right, and center, right? And add to that work uncertainty. It's quite a lot, right? It is quite a lot. You're piling on a basket that's already really, really full.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say that is tricky. At the same time, we could also think about it as, look, it's already difficult, so you might as well just make the most of it and make it like suffer at once instead of suffering later. So let's just do that. But I think there's a lot of those elements of your brain is not functioning properly, so you forget a lot of things. Your cognitive ability is affected. You changing hormonally a lot, so your highs and your lows of the normal hormonal loads make you not react as your normal self would have reacted, which means, for instance, corporate emails, right? Things like that, corporate communications, how you articulate things. And all of that has an impact. And I haven't even talked about the fact of you may see your life differently because you may want to spend your time differently. I haven't touched on any of that.
And I suppose that always, I know we will circle back to the portfolio life, but that all feeds into that too, doesn't it? All of those turning points in a woman's, in men too, but women's lives that drive those sort of changes that we make. But I wanted to briefly touch on, we were talking about women's safety, and I wanted to bring that to sort of, I know we very quickly touched on the sort of financial literacy and sort of household finances and the impact of that awareness, I suppose. So it would be great to hear from you, why you feel that it matters for women to know where the money is in your household.
I think it's very important that there may be someone who has a more preeminent role on doing certain responsibilities in a household. But everyone should know the basics from those tasks, right? If you don't know where, your insurances are, or where the personal data is, or where your kid's school is, or where your pensions are, or where your investments are, or who your house insurance provider is, or who the alarm provider is, or whatever, right? When you have a crisis and you're on your own, you can't solve it. Because not only do you have the crisis, but which is already stressful on itself, but you don't know how to go and find a solution. So then you have the stress of, I should have known and I don't know, right? So if you can remove stresses from those situations, that's one of the things. You don't want to be Googling in the middle of planning a funeral or planning a divorce. You don't want to be Googling, where is my will? So those things are basic things that should be known to both parties of the relationship, regardless of the type of relationship. Both people should know exactly where these things are. And it's very important. And these are really some of these things. So for instance, doing a will is could be one of the hardest things to do. You then go into discussions that are horrible, like what happens to your children if you're both not around? I mean, it's awful discussion to have. Awful. Like any normal human being would be absolutely broken from having to even consider that, but it's very important that you consider that, right? And so then we extend that into, where's your money? Where's your investments? Where's your pensions? Do you have any? How do you access those things? Where are the codes? Where are the cards? What are the access rights? Who made those decisions? So all of that's super important. Personal insurances like health and disability insurance and critical illness insurance, do you have them? So with the finances, it's exactly that. You should know where the money is. You should know that if a disaster happens, what do you need to do? And it is incredible to hear when there is a UK-wide testing of mobile phone signals that there is a need to say to women who have a mobile phone hidden because you're planning to escape a domestic violence situation, don't forget to remove the battery off that phone.
Jeez, yeah.
Right? And why? Because they're not financial independent. They're trying to escape a situation that puts them in danger and puts their children in danger. And, the one thing that they need to escape is a mobile phone. So money would also be good to have. So, to avoid situations like that, money helps in situations like this, right? If we're going to start, I would start from the very beginning. A lot of these hard conversations need to start before people live together.
Yeah, exactly.
They should
And
start very
your
early
children
on,
have-
because money is one of the reasons people separate. And thinking, you don't need to think the same, but you need to think in a way that is compatible money-wise. If you have someone whose only goal in life is to spend, and someone whose only goal in life is save, that's going to be a very difficult relationship down the line. So I would say those conversations should start in the beginning. But then I guess the question that a lot of people don't do prenups, but before you get married, or if you are getting married, a prenup is a natural moment in time to have those conversations, because these things need to be written in a document. There are countries where there is a provision for all of these things that people feel, oh, I'm protected, so I'm not going to write any of this. But think about it. You should really think about it. So there's some moments in life that naturally trigger that conversation. When people have children, when people move jobs, or when they lose jobs, or so it's important to take those moments as this is a moment where we should talk about these things. Yeah. And bring them up in a moment of calm without the kids around, if you have kids, so that you're in the best of moods and the other person's in the best of moods, because sometimes there are frictions in those conversations if you haven't had them before. Right. But one thing that I seen the other day that I thought was fantastic was a couple that had prepared a folder that was "When We Die" folder for their kids.
Okay.
And so they had all the information about the insurances, wills, what do you do, who do you contact? So talking about something like that, that's kind of a good icebreaker, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be a good, nice way of easing into this.
And just to start, and it's not as scary as you think, and just feeling more comfortable around money and finance and where it's comes from and where it's going.
Okay. So there is an important element of this, which is the way that I was raised.
Yep.
I was raised to always know how to balance the books. I had a little book, and just a little book like this, where I would write, like my mom would give me the money, I would write, okay, how much I got and what I bought. And I must have kept that rhythm for a while, because a few years back I did a cleanup and I found my notebooks from my first years in London kept.
Wow.
And so that was just, there were certain things that were embedded with this. And my mom always emphasized the importance of, you don't spend more than you make. I remember when I was between 12 and 14, going with my friend, one of my best friends, Teresa, we would go and go downtown for shopping, and we'd have a budget. So the first trip would be to list everything we wanted. Then we'd come home, we see what the budget was, and then we'd select it with the things that we could buy.
That's
because
so brilliant.
It's kind of
so
like
simple.
Simple. Now, specifically going to when I started working, I think a couple of things happened. I was fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know, but something happened on the year that I started to work, which was everyone was on defined benefit pension schemes. So they know exactly how much they're going to get when they retire. And massive, the world had started to realize that that was not sustainable. So people were moved to people below a certain age. So people that were of a certain age, they could continue with defined benefits, but new employees or people below a certain age were all moved a mandatory move to defined contribution. And that happened within the first quarter of me being at work. And that has forced me to go and read all of this documentation. What does this mean? And that means we're now going to be able to select what things the company corporate pension plan is invested in, but also it's our responsibility. So if we decide to, if we invest this not in a wise way, we may not have a pension by the time we retire. So don't really ask me why. It was just something I did when I was 23, I guess. And so I read all the documentation. I could have just signed the waivers and go into the defaults, the default allocations, because usually you have a default allocations or investments, or you can choose your own. And I, again, no explanation, just did that. And I decided what to invest in, and I read into it. And then later on, there was the ability to do AVCs, so annual voluntary contributions, which means that you put money from your salary into your pension, and usually, or in some cases, so that is tax-free, but then in some cases, they're also matched. So the employer matches whatever you put in. The easiest money I've ever made in my life. Right? So I maxed out on those for as much as I could. I automated all the savings into ISAs so that the money comes in, I don't even think about it. First, it goes into the ISA and then I spend it.
So you're paying yourself first, essentially.
Yeah. I thought if I'm going to wait to month end, I know what's going to happen. So if I just remove that decision from the process, then it's automated. Those things are responsible for my financial independence. Those things are the things that allowed me to be able to do whatever the hell I want, to not work if I don't want to work, to say no to clients, to live life the way I live life.
And are you ever too late to start? Is it literally that easy for people who are
very
in
easy
their 40s and just started?
And not just saving it, but investing it. So I had kind of an emergency fund. That means if you lose your job, if your boiler breaks down, if your car packs up or something like that, you are not going to add further stress into your life than the stress already caused by that event. The event causes stress. The lack of money associated with the event should not be causing you more stress. And that's what an emergency fund does. Okay. And that should be in cash equivalent so that you can use it. Right. And then the rest, once you build that, you start building your investment pot. Later in life, I consolidated my ISAs and I moved to a provider that has index trackers, so investment funds that have very low cost, right? Look, anyone that gets added across the food chain needs to eat, right? So if you think about that and financial products, you add one person, that's another mouth to feed. And so that makes those products more expensive at the end. Really with a focus on cost, on low cost products. So very diversified. I have people asking me, so what do you invest in? I don't select stocks. I just invest in broad-based equity indices in the cheapest available formats. So all of those things were things that I've done through the years that at the time, none of these were a massive decision. And now I look back. When I say to people, start early, it doesn't matter if you start with £5, start. Because what you want to do is to develop the muscle of habit of investing. Think about how you are maximizing the difference between what you make and what you spend, because what you keep, it's all about what you keep. And the thing is that I've worked with people who made, 7-8 figures, and there's people making 7 figures and are living paycheck to paycheck because they are just feeding a spending habit, right?
Keeping up with the Joneses.
They're keeping up with the Joneses. And that is a very dangerous exercise.
the more you hear about investing, it's all about, as you say, starting really early. And I suppose that is partly, as you say, developing that muscle, but also it's before the financial responsibilities really, really hit you, I suppose. So you're used to having that amount going out every month into your investments. You're used to all of that before you end up with the cost of children or maybe school fees, mortgages, all the rest of it that comes
A disease,
later
unemployment.
on. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's first, I mean, we're talking about the ideal, right? The ideals is you start as a kid. You start understanding these concepts as a kid, which is you go to the school fair, your parent gave you 5 quid or 10 quid or 20, whatever your parents gave you. When that's gone, that's gone. You don't come back for more. This is a very important lesson. And then when you start working, but what I mean is that if you haven't started and in your 40s and you're thinking, oh gosh, I haven't started and now it's not worth it. No, start now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today is better than tomorrow. Start now. Yesterday was ideal. Today's better than tomorrow. And so start and slowly and without guilt. I mean, look, we all have a path that brought us to where we are. Don't kill yourself over it, but just be aware of it and say, okay, now I'm here. And if I'm in my 40s and I'm worried about retirement, what can I do now? Right. And you can obviously know exactly where your money is and how it is being spent and increase your savings rate. And then once you have a cushion, increase your investment rate. Yeah. And but also the other side of things is there anything you can do where you can increase your earning rate? And it's to the point where, we were talking, I care a lot more about women than men. So, we're going to talk about that. But is there anything that you can do that will make you more marketable or more able to earn more, more appealing, more shielded for what's to come in the future? And that doesn't come necessarily from, I see a lot of women thinking, oh, I need to do a course. I need to do a certification of this. No, you don't. You don't need to do any of that. You don't need to spend a penny on any of that. Just need to, okay, look at your skills. Everyone is talking about AI. Go and learn AI. You don't need to spend any money on that. You need 20 minutes a day and go into YouTube and then apply what you're learning. Doesn't cost you anything, right? So get a new activity. So is there something that you're great at that outside of your job that you could be doing on the side as an extra activity that would allow you to earn more, have a different income skill? And then we come into this thing of portfolio careers, right? People who are doing different things at the same time. I hear a lot of women in late 40s saying, oh, now it's down the cliff, right? Because, who is going to hire someone with my age?
Well, and I don't know about you, but just being in late 40s, the sense of like potential and creativity and possibility is just overwhelming. And it's quite intense. It's like this hormone shift. Your kids are a little bit older, so there's room to breathe a bit, and you're just coming up for air and realizing what you said really connected with me is that relationships, right?
And I think for us, it's about teaching our children that too.
Yeah.
I know we've discussed teaching them about sort of finances and saving, and there are some amazing platforms out there now for children to help them learn.
I do believe that schools are doing us a disservice by not teaching financial literacy.
Okay? Agreed.
And this should be basic curriculum. So let's talk about the money conversations. I talk to my kids very directly about money. I think money should not be a taboo. And it just shouldn't be a forbidden topic. We should be able to talk about this. So with the kids, we talk about budgets, things costing money, things that cost money and you need to buy them, things that cost money and they're nice to have. And then if you buy this, you don't buy that. So the idea of keeping a budget and keeping the books, right? The children have pocket money or money that is given to them by families and so on, that goes into the piggy bank. But then we get the children to, when we go somewhere, for instance, we'll give them cash for something. And then when it's over, it's over. And if you didn't spend it, it goes into your piggy bank. Oldest child does not spend. Youngest child in the first 5 minutes. Everything. Everything is paid for. Every service is paid for. So they need to understand that. And that to be able to pay for something, there needs to be money in the account, and to have money in the account, the money needs to come from either your work or income, or that is generated through investments or whatever. So
And
money should not be a scary thing.
Exactly.
Money should not be a scary thing, and we need to demystify things. It's the same way that, you know, you should learn how to fry an egg, right? You should know about this. Let's just take the mysticism away. And there are a couple of books, and there's a couple of apps that teach people as well. I bought a book, I think it's called Investing for Kids.
Okay.
We haven't gone through it completely, but there are books, and you can, you know, start with books or start with, see, for instance, maybe videos on YouTube. The other element of it is that there's a lot of things that, look, everything has a cost. And so even if the cost is not money, then you always pay. You either pay with your time or you pay with your money, but you always pay. And so that's another thing that I try to teach the kids, right? Nothing is free. There's nothing is free. And then another element of it is about how communication and negotiation skills. And I think they are absolutely key. And I don't see the schools teaching this, but I think this is. So sometimes when the kids come home with these forms to raise for this or raise for that, right? A charity, whatever. We always make them go and work for that so that they know how to ask, and they know how to articulate, and they know how to explain, and they stop being uncomfortable asking, right? The easiest thing is to give money to the kid and send them back to school and off you go. The hard thing is to go around and knocking on other people's doors and saying, okay, we're fundraising for whatever, and teach the kid how to do it. It's going to take you a lot more time, but it's an important skill.
I must say, a big turning point in our house was giving the children access through our technology to see their accounts and control what they wanted to put into savings each month, what they wanted to put into, when you talk about liquidity and them understanding, they have savings account that they can't then remove from. They have savings accounts that they can withdraw from. They'll really think about, well, I'm saving for X, or it's really changed the way they see their pocket money.
There is, I mean, for instance, the kids. So you can have ISAs as well for the children, and stocks ISAs and so on. They don't get involved into deciding what goes in there. We decide, right? But the sooner you start those, and there's a compounding element that if you are able to, and if you start contributing to that, by the time your child is 23, that is quite an incredible amount to have. And the other thing as well that I do sometimes is that, when the kids get vouchers, I buy the vouchers from them. So if there isn't something that they really want from a particular store, I'll buy the voucher. Typically they get, I don't know about your children, ours get a lot of Amazon vouchers. And they may not want something specific. And I say, if there isn't something that you specifically want, I don't want you to go and spend that money. Here's the value of the money. I'll take the voucher. And then they put it in the piggy bank.
These are all amazing takeaways for adults as well.
Oh gosh.
I wanted to just kind of say a couple takeaways from me, Claudia, were the little notepad. I mean, obviously that instilled in you from such a young age, and it created the woman you are.
I would say that is not like, that is one of the elements underlying it, but I want to give you something more practical to take away. So having an idea of your identity, of who you are, what you want, is one of the most important things, because a lot of people who do not try to build other things, they don't build it out of fear. And the fear of loss of that identity, fear of loss of, income security, right? The predictability of a certain income. So yes, having the financial conversation is very important, but also have the identity conversation. So the odds are that if you have a job, you don't hate everything about that job. You probably quite like some of the things that you do. You may even love some of the things that you do. You just maybe just wish to do them in a slightly different way, or in a slightly different setting, with more flexibility, more different autonomy, more creative freedom to do other things. And so if you start thinking what that is, then it's really putting the finger on the wound. What is that? What bothers you about the job, and what are the things you love? And then you start decomposing them and try to create different things around those things that you really enjoy doing. Because as I said, the bulk of what I do is still finance, is still what I've been doing for I don't know how long. And I love doing it. I absolutely love doing it. I just do it in a slightly different way, and I get to choose my clients, and that has allowed me to have a more peaceful relationship with it. But writing is something that I love to do, regardless of what it pays me. So and so typically, to start that portfolio career, the easiest thing that you may be able to do is to do a variation of the thing you're already doing. Yes. Because you're already getting paid for it. You already have a proof that works, but do it in a slightly different way. So you can do it for another type of industry and so on. Obviously, underlying that, yes, relationships, everyone that you meet, people that you meet, it doesn't matter. They're all relationships. Stop thinking transactionally about relationships. I'm just thinking, honestly, if your other half all of a sudden didn't come home today, God forbid, right? Knock on wood, right? What would you panic about? So think about that. And what would be the first things that you would panic about? Okay, and then write them down. These are the first 3, 5 things. Okay, that's your to-do list for the next month.
Well done.
That's great.
Claudia,
if people wanted to find you, work with you, learn more, where can they find you?
We talked a lot about money. I don't do any work on money. So we just make it very clear. Yes. But find me on Substack.
Yeah, you're brilliant on Substack. Claudia, you are amazing.
Thank you both for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on The Bridge today. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone who might find it helpful too. And if you enjoyed this episode, leaving a review or following the show really helps these conversations reach more people. We'll be back soon with another conversation about health, freedom, and building a life that truly works. See you next time on The Bridge.